All right. So feel free to show your face or not. It's totally up to you. We are recording this and we are going to be sharing this with people that couldn't make it. So if you don't want your video on, I totally understand. Just keep it off and keep yourself muted. We are going to open it up for questions as we have time, but I think it'll be easier to put the questions in the chat. So we'll be trying to monitor that throughout, but feel free to engage in the chat. We want to hear from you. And like I said, if you need to leave early, that's fine. We're going to be recording it, so you'll be able to see the whole thing in the email. Okay, admit. I'm going to make you co-host, Robyn, and also
Okay.
Sadie, just in case you all can let people in that are coming in late. All right. Everybody can hear us okay? Sometimes my Wi-Fi is a little spotty here. Yeah, we're good. All right.
Boxes keep changing. People keep coming in.
I know. I'm going to switch to speaker view. Okay. Well, so we're going to keep this to 45 minutes. We want to respect all of your time. So let's jump in and get started. So this webinar is called Breaking Down Barriers and Creating Change with Sadie Smith and Robyn Mourning, who are both with us. And I think they're two of the boldest people that I know personally, which is why I'm really excited to have them on this call. Let me make sure everybody's muted. There's no background sound. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm just going to introduce us all. I know a lot of you might know who we are already, but in case you don't, I'm Kelly Smyth-Dent. I'm an LCSW, and I'm also an EMDR consultant and the founder of Scaling Up. I'm going to be moderating this Q&A and interview with Robyn. So we're going to both be kind of asking questions and engaging, checking the chat, things like that. All right, let me figure out where that sound is coming from. Okay, there we go. All right, so Robyn Mourning. Where's Robyn? You're not on my screen anymore. Wave to everybody. There you are. So Robyn Mourning is a social entrepreneur and a trained marriage, family, and child therapist, a trauma recovery specialist, and an EMDR clinician. She's also the program coordinator at Scaling Up, and she's going to be a speaker at our upcoming Be Bold Summit in June. And then Sadie Smith, say hello, Sadie, is a licensed marriage and family therapist who lives and practices in Denver, Colorado. She specializes in offering EMDR intensives. She also happens to be a Scaling Up trainer for our EMDR intensives course online, and she's also going to be a speaker at the Be Bold Summit coming up in June. So Sadie and I met back in 2017 at a training with Dr. Nacho Herrero. And we quickly learned that we were aligned in our interests in scaling up EMDR therapy and doing humanitarian work and in traveling. So we stayed connected after that over time. And we're going to share a little bit with you about some of the adventures that we've gone on together. So the reason that I wanted to do this webinar with Sadie is because I personally think she's a pioneer in the field. She thinks outside the box. She's really bold. She takes chances. Sometimes it flops, sometimes it doesn't. And she's just kind of moves on either way. And it's just kind of unfazed, just like, you know, that's just what happens. And she's a risk taker. And I love that about her. And I think it's led to a bunch of incredible experiences that we're going to talk about some today. So for this time, I want you to have the opportunity to, for Sadie to share kind of your life policy, how you run your business, some of the work that you've done internationally pre-COVID and hopefully again sometime soon. And one of those experiences was traveling with me in Southeast Asia for over a month. And it was, I think, the second time we met. I was planning this trip and I just kind of on a whim was like, oh, do you want to come with me? And she immediately was like, yes. And then I was thinking, that's strange. Like she just said yes right away. I wonder if she's actually means it or is going to follow through. And like, lo and behold, a few months later, she's like, should I book my flights? And I was like, are you coming the whole month? She was like, yes. And I was like, who is this person? So I want to talk a little bit about that experience for you, Sadie, because I know a lot of people that we talk to are just like, how did you take time off your practice? How did you, manage that financially? What made you just say yes? And how did you make it happen? So maybe you can share a little bit about that with the group.
Yeah, so one of my life, I wouldn't call it a policy, but I don't know what else to call it, that I've done for a long time is when opportunity just lands in my lap like that, I just say yes. And usually, I won't say always, but almost always, it tends to work out, whether it turns into a wonderful learning experience, which some people would call failures, or it turns into a raving success. It does tend to take me to the places in life that I've gotten to. And I wouldn't be where I am today had I not said yes to some very key things. Sometimes they're small, but like saying yes to Kelly, I knew from the moment I met Kelly at that training with Dr. Herrero that she was my kind of people, both her and Nacho. I just felt it in my body. These are the kind of people that I want to work with. This is the work I want to do. And so I started pursuing that and creating a connection with Kelly. And so then when she and I were having coffee and she asked if I wanted, she said, I've got this trip that's starting to form. Are you interested? And I just said yes, because that was, again, when opportunity just lands like that, I say yes. And that was also very much the work I wanted to be doing with the kind of people that I want to be doing it with. So it was very easy to do that with. And it just felt right in my body. But sometimes you don't always have that body sensation to it. And sometimes or you get your body saying like, are you sure? And sometimes fighting through that to say yes and see where it takes you, and viewing it as a grand adventure. It's all about paradigm shift and paradigm management, I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Sadie. This is Robyn here. So when Kelly asked you to go to Southeast Asia and you said yes, how did you have that availability in your practice? Did you have your private practice at the time? Were you working in a different setting? Like, how did you have that space and availability to say yes and actually go?
Well, when she asked, I didn't answer any of those questions. I just said yes. And then those questions came later and it's like, I'll figure it out. And I make it sound easy and it's not. There was a lot of logistical things that needed to be figured out, but I did have my private practice at the time, and I've structured my practice to have the kind of flexibility to be able to do that kind of work. And that's where the intensives come in, because that's the real key in my business model for being able to do things outside of just seeing clients all day, every day. And so having the intensive model, and at that point, I was still refining that model and what that looked like for me. That was relatively new. Because I tried a couple of different models that didn't work, and I was just coming to the model that was working. So some of that was timing, but it was also, I don't know how I'll make it work, but I will make it work because it felt so right in my body. And so the logistics of, what am I gonna do with my 2 cats for a month? And what am I gonna do with my weekly clients that I'm seeing? Because I wasn't doing solely intensives at that point. And the answers to all of those questions initially were, I don't know. And I think sometimes, besides just saying yes, we have to be okay with the I don't know. And as Kelly and I tell this story, I went back to Southeast Asia after the trip she and I made, and I was there it was supposed to be 3 months, and it ended up being 2 months. And so figuring out those questions, when she and I kind of decided to do this, there were still a lot of I don't knows, and those just needed to be okay. So sometimes it's about having the capacity to sit with the I don't know and letting that be okay. So, but the real key logistically in my practice is the intensive.
So kind of following up on the intensives, you said that you tried a couple different models that didn't work first. So I'm curious, I know a lot of people that are kind of moving into the intensive model feel really nervous, because they've got their structure in place, they've got their weekly clients, they've kind of got their system that is going to get disrupted to a degree as they're making that transition. So can you talk about what that experience was like for you, how you handled, any fear or emotions or anything that came up with that?
I want to say I was really organized about all of it, and I thought through plans, and that was not at all what happened. So I originally had a private practice up in Montana and started working with the idea of longer sessions, and wasn't quite at the point of doing intensives. And I closed that practice and I went and lived in Argentina for a little over a year. And when I came back from Argentina, I had some savings to reopen my practice, but not as much as I had originally planned on, because I stayed in Argentina a little too long. I have a habit of doing that. And so I needed to make some money. But when I came to Denver, my intention was to really focus on intensives and developing my style for doing that and developing that business model. But I didn't have an actual plan. And so then as I was, establishing myself in Denver, I had a few contacts here, but I didn't have a client base to come back to. And so I got scared. And when people would call me and want to do hourly therapy, I was saying yes to a lot of those because I needed to pay the bills. And what happened is I started, my schedule wasn't full, but it was headed in that direction. So then if somebody wanted to do a longer intensive, it was harder to find space for that. And it was trying to figure out how to juggle that. And then life happened and saved me. I got really, really sick and had to not close my practice, but I ended up in the hospital for about 3 months. And so I referred those clients out. And so then starting over a third time after that, then I was like, okay, I'm going to try again. And same thing. I wanted to do intensives, was very, knew that was what I wanted to be doing. Again, that felt very right in my body. So that's when I decided maybe I should develop a plan and get organized. And that was when I decided that I would do the hybrid model that I use now, that the first and third weeks of every month I would reserve for doing intensives. And then the second and fourth weeks I could reserve for those hourly clients because those are easier to pick up to start paying the bills and a lot of the consultation that I do. So then I could work both of those into my practice. And I've been doing that for a handful of months when Kelly and I decided to go to Southeast Asia. So I had clients that were already used to me only being able to see them every other week. And I was prepping a lot of them ahead of time for me being gone for a month, but my prepping them was mostly trying to finish them up. So I was using those first and third weeks to do longer sessions with them to get them finished. So they didn't have to wait on me to get back from my adventures to be able to be where they wanted in their life. And so that was when I developed that hybrid model of first, third, second, fourth. And then I've tweaked that a little bit more to fit what I'm doing in life with Breakout now and some of that stuff. But that's a lot of trial and error and a lot of backing up and starting over, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. But that was, it was like, okay, I want to do this. And I really believe it's important that when you have something you want to do in life, but you don't know where to start, you need to just start moving in a direction. And sometimes that will take you right where you want to be. Sometimes that will show you, no, not that way, go this way or whatever. But if you're not moving in a direction, you're not going to go anywhere. So let the I don't know be okay and just start moving and see what happens.
Yeah, I like that. Start somewhere. It'll lead you to a place where that is. You can only find out by doing it, right?
Right.
So with that, what barriers have you come across and how have you overcome them or figured out how to remove them completely or get community support around? Like what challenges and barriers have you faced with not just your model of intensives, but in general, how you approach your work as a therapist, doing work in person or virtually with clients, and coupled with your traveling work as a humanitarian worker?
Yeah, and I find that this is not a barrier that I would say I have totally conquered yet. I'm actually fighting it right now on a specific project that I want to start. And I find that if I'm wanting to do something, but I'm having a hard time moving in a direction, because I have lots of experiences in life, many of them professional, but sometimes personal, where you just start moving in a direction and it does take you somewhere, either where you want to be or somewhere sometimes even more interesting. And sometimes a place that you're very glad not to stay very long. But I find when I'm having a hard time doing what I naturally do and just start moving in a direction, when I'm not able to do that, when I sit with it and I'm looking, okay, what's missing? Well, sometimes it's what's holding me back, and there might be a fear there. And I think that's a lot of us. For me particularly, I find if there's something missing information-wise, what is the information that I'm missing? And when I can identify that, I can go seek that. And that often will then get me moving in a direction. And so whether it's, creating some community support and talking to colleagues or talking to a good friend, or whether sometimes it's the support or it's finding talking to somebody, but I don't know how to solve this problem, but I don't know where to start solving this problem. And they may have me, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, and that networking piece. Or sometimes if it's fear-based, I'll do this. I don't remember where I learned to do this, but this was not originally my idea. I'll tell somebody, I'm doing this, even if the very first movement in that direction is me telling them that, and they don't know that. Even telling all of you right now that I have this project that I'm a little stuck in is part of that. So I'm doing it right now. And so sometimes just telling people, whether it's one close person or a bunch of wonderful people in Zoom boxes, but that I'm going to do this, then as you've told somebody about it, sometimes it gets you talking about it and you solve your own problem. Sometimes you share the problem with them and they can help you solve it. Sometimes you never get to the problem or the missing information, but you've put it out there into the world. You've told them about it. Maybe are going to ask you about it down the road. And sometimes that creates the motivation that you need. But I find when I'm stuck, you have to identify your stuck, but then is it fear or is it missing information? Which of those two is it? And then once you identify that, oftentimes that can get you leading down the right road to, or going down the right road to figuring that out. Sounds good on paper. It's not always that easy, as we all know.
I like that you said, is it fear or is it lacking information? Because I think the two can go hand in hand, but I've found when I've experienced these things that sometimes the fear is there because of the lack of information. And then as soon as I fill that gap, the fear subsides or it becomes more manageable and not so paralyzing. So I love that you said that and that you talked about networking, because I've found the same thing, that a lot of building scaling up has just been having coffees with people. I mean, you and Robyn are great examples of people that I, randomly got together with, somehow had coffee with, liked each other, and then have kept in touch over time and got together at the right time to do projects. And then the relationship has built on from there. So I think even saying yes to things like coffee, or feeling that thing in your body of like, oh, I'm kind of drawn to this person, I don't know why, let's get coffee and explore it. And then sometimes it goes nowhere. Even with Robyn, we didn't get back together until a couple years later after our coffee date. But once I had a moment where I was like, oh, I need X. And I remember I had this coffee date with Robyn. I wonder what she's up to now. And then I kind of went down that rabbit hole, and now we've been working together closely for 2 years. So you just don't know. So I really love that you said that. It sounds to me like you have this like kind of mission or vision or calling or whatever you would call it that is really important to you and that you've become fairly clear on, which I think has helped you find the right people that have similar visions, or the right, saying yes to the right opportunities. So can you talk a little bit about what that is for you, and how you were talking about that Southeast Asia project where you went there for 2 months, talking a little bit more about kind of what happened there, because some things went according to plan, some didn't, how you dealt with that, how you felt about that, because I know it got cut off early. There was kind of a grief process, and it kind of shifted some of, sometimes it can feel like you're on a path, and then when it doesn't happen, you can feel like despair, like it's just, not going to happen. And so can you talk a little bit more about all of that process for you?
Yeah, and that ties into another thing I wanted to say about sometimes it's the fear piece, but when it's missing information, or sometimes it's just that motivation of telling somebody about it, like I was mentioning, sometimes, and Kelly and I did this, that led to this project you're talking about, it's just about putting a date on the calendar, even if it feels random. And so when Kelly and I were in Southeast Asia the first time in November of 2018, and as she and I were talking about lots of different ideas as she was developing scaling up and the direction of the work she wanted to do with that, and I was talking what I wanted to do. And we decided, as we did that trip and a lot of the stuff that came out of that, we did a lot of networking with other NGO workers and human rights activists and humanitarians in Bangladesh and in India. And one of the activist organizations that we worked with is based in Thailand. And so we had some connections, not very many, but we had some connections. And so we decided to go back and to do some more work in the refugee camp in Bangladesh, out of Cox's Bazar with the Rohingya. refugees. And in deciding to do that, it's like, we want to do more of this work, was kind of the original, I wouldn't call it a plan, but that's what it was. And so then it was, how much time? Kelly asked me that as we were going somewhere one day, and I said, how about 3 months? Just a random number that popped into my head. And she said, okay, when? I said, how about March 1st? And once we had that down, then getting everything in place to make that whole project what it was, there was a group in Basha, in Bangladesh, the named Basha, in Dhaka, in the capital, that we wanted to go back and do a research project with. And that's when we were looking at doing that. But then if I was going to go back and do that research project, and doing some healing with women in a shelter for women that were either at high risk of exploitation, sexual exploitation, or had been trafficked. So we wanted to do a research project with some of the protocols there. But then it was, if I was going to go back, let's add on to that and do some more work and go back to the refugee camp. And so the first step was really just putting a date on the calendar, March 1st, 2019. And then we built everything off of that, essentially. And so we designed that research project, and we got everything in place to do that in Dhaka, in the capital. So then I went back to do that. And then as we did that, and we let some of those people that we had been in touch with before know that I was coming back, then it was, oh, will you come work with our staff over here? And then one of the organizations wanted me to go to Malaysia and do a speaking event, because they were working with a lot of the Rohingya refugees there. And so then I was going to be over in Kuala Lumpur but it didn't make sense to just go for one day and do a speaking event. So then we found some other organizations there that we could partner with and do some projects with. And so part of it was the connections we had. And then part of it was us just cold calling, just emailing random organizations saying, hey, we're this organization that does this really amazing healing trauma work in a group setting, and we think your organization might benefit from it. We're going to be in your area. Are you interested? And just offering that to them for free. And a lot of times we got no response, or people, not interested, but we had people that said, yeah, come work with us. And so then I was working with an orphanage in Kuala Lumpur, and then I was working with another group that works with refugees in Kuala Lumpur coming out of Thailand and Malaysia, and then going back to Bangladesh and doing several other projects. And so some of the contacts we created before, but then part of my work in Bangladesh, once I went back, was to create some more contacts with other organizations. So it was setting up coffee and meeting with them and saying, here, this is what we do. We think this is something that would be beneficial, but what do you think? And some of them, worked with us, and some of them didn't. And so that led to a lot of different opportunities in providing IGTP really to a lot of different people in a lot of different contexts. And so that big project, and then doing work with refugees in the camps, and then also working with people in the host community in Cox's Bazar, and then the big research project up in Dhaka, there were just so many moving elements to that. But Kelly and I had no idea it was going to turn into all of that when we initially said March 1st, 3 months. And so, and even Kelly's initial trip that we went on in the previous November, it started with a somebody reached out to her on Facebook, and it started out as a not EMDR training she was doing. It was marriage and family training. And so then she kind of expanded that, and then it turned into what was originally going to be, I think, only a week or so, turned into a whole month in working in 3 different countries. And so sometimes just saying yes and starting something, you can, really grow that into something else, or keep it limited to what you can do. I don't think you always have to do these big grand things that you hear Kelly and I talk about. You can do small projects as well. What fits into your life, what fits into your schedule.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so many ways to go about it. And one of the key factors is just building relationship with people. Once folks reach out to you saying, hey, we really would love your support, and, teach us, guide us, help us through this. And then just reaching out to the community as much as you can to build more relationships while you're there, and how that can be done within our own neighborhoods. Like you said, we don't have to do something big like traveling internationally. It can be something local as well. So I appreciate you tying that together too, because not everyone wants to do that or can do that work. And so they're trying to imagine, well, how do I do that type of work right where I'm at? So it sounds like building those relationships with folks so that you can figure out where the need is. Let people know what you're interested in helping with and what you can do. And then, yeah, you'll get some invitations with some help. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's not a shortage for communities wanting extra support when it comes to mental health and healing. So thank you. And I'm just getting a vibe that you really like exciting opportunities. Like you like that, that energy that comes with something new and big, especially when it connects to your passions and things that you try to do with your life and your practice. And then when that happens, you seem to say yes without hesitation. You figure the rest out later. How and why do you have that philosophy, and how has it served you throughout your life? You know, because I'm guessing it doesn't just stop, start and end with your practice, right? With your career. And so we like to let folks in on like how we kind of do this work-life integration. And so how does this come into play? Like throughout your, how did you get that? Were you always like that? Is it something that you cultivated through time? I don't know. Are you willing to share that with us?
Yeah, sure. I won't share my dating life with you because that's another ballgame. But so have I always been that way? I kind of think so. I'm going to blame my parents here for this one because I can. And I think my parents very much cultivated in me, I wouldn't say free spirit, because that has the wrong connotation to it, but that, I can do anything that I want to, peace. But it's also, I've had some stuff happen in life. And when you come to the realization that I got through that, parts of that were fun, parts of that were not fun at all. And some parts of that were painful, expletive. But I got through it. And sometimes I got through it and am better now for it. Sometimes, I just got through it. And that's it. But knowing that when stuff happens, I'll find a way to get through it. And then getting to the other side of that, learning what you need to from it, but recognizing, and this is going to sound really flippant, and I don't mean it this way, but it's either going to kill me and then I don't have to worry about it anymore, I'm done. Or whatever happens, I'll find a way through it. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be fun. But it means I'll get through it. And I also decided, I think here's where part of it comes from. So I was married and divorced really early, both of them. And so when I got divorced, I kind of decided I really want to go live life and do some really amazing things. And I'm not going to let anything stop me. I'm not going to let that fear of the what if stop me. And that started with, and I remember this, it started with going to eat in a restaurant by myself when I was first separated from my now ex-husband. And that was hard, to go and sit in a restaurant and to be by yourself, because that's not always really easy. I can do it much better now. But that very first time I did it, I was like, that feels not impossible, but hard. So I made myself go and do it. And then, and that's a really small thing, but then going and doing those hard things, sometimes it's about cultivating that, but sometimes it's about that. I'm not going to let the fear of the what if, I'm not going to let that dictate my life. And it kind of became a mission where I'm going to deal with what actually is in front of me. And I'm not going to let all those fears of, well, what if this, what if this, what if this paralyze me. And again, I think that mostly comes from my parents, just sort of cultivated that in me. And so then when I had some relatively unpleasant experiences, divorce early in life, I decided, okay, I'm not going to let this define me. I'm going to go live my life. And I've always done that. And that was really when I started just saying yes to things, whether it was yes to my own small little challenge, or it was yes to something bigger. And then that led me to some interesting things in life. And so, yeah, really where that comes from, it's just that matter of, you know what, I'll get through it. And I might get through it well, and I might get through it not well, but we'll get through it. So I don't know if that's helpful for anybody, but yeah, if you want to borrow my parents, let me know. They'd be happy to help.
Well, it seems to me like, it's one of the ways that you've built resiliency, throughout your life, personally or professionally, kind of, realizing I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through it, by getting through it and then building that philosophy. And I think, all of us here have gone through hardships in our own way and have had learning experiences as a result. And so, it seems to me like finding the strengths that each of us have gained from the hardships that we've gone through, and then how we want to use that to kind of propel us into, the things that feel exciting, important, that we want to pursue in life. That's what I'm hearing, at least. So thanks for sharing that.
Exactly. And sometimes something lands in your lap and sometimes you're seeking it. Like when I went to Argentina the first time, I was in Montana and everything, my practice was going well in Montana. There was no reason to leave Montana. I was happy there. I enjoyed it. My practice was thriving. I just decided I wanted to become more bilingual. I wanted to be more fluent in Spanish was the reason, I tell people, because that sounds good. I just wanted to go on an adventure. And so I closed my practice and I found an opportunity down in Argentina where it was not working in therapy. I was horseback riding and tango dancing. And so I was horseback riding to pay the bills and I was tango dancing on the weekend just to have a break and to learn Spanish, which I did. I learned some Gaucho Spanish that's interesting. But it also was, I just wanted to do that in life. And so how am I going to do, when I decided to close my practice and move to South America for an indeterminate amount of time, at first I didn't know what country. I just, picked a date. I'm going to close my practice by this date. And once I had that date on the calendar, then it was figuring out, okay, which country? Well, when you're a tango dancer, there's no country to go to but Argentina, check. And then it was like, okay, how are you going to afford this? Because I had some money in savings, but, and I found an opportunity where I could do horseback riding, guiding at an estancia where they wouldn't pay me. It was a volunteer, but they would cover my room and board. Great. So then I can pay to go dancing on the weekends and I could do that. And I just left. And when I went to Argentina, I didn't know when I was going to come back. I wasn't moving to Argentina forever, but I didn't have a specific, I'm going to go for 6 months or 3 months because I'd closed my practice and moved all of my stuff into storage. And so I could just go until the bank account said come back. And that was what I did. And so doing that. And so sometimes it's a matter of, I just want to do this. And so I'm going to go do this and I'm going to make it happen. And I did. And then sometimes the universe helps you out. Like when I came back to Denver after that whole thing and I opened my practice, I had clients, but it wasn't picking up as quickly as I had hoped it would. And that's where I was getting worried. And the universe was just not working the way I had kind of planned on it working. But then when I got really sick and ended up in the hospital, then I was glad that I didn't have that many clients to refer out. And so that ended up working out in the long run better. And so sometimes it's knowing that this may work out better. It may not. I can't say every adversity I've ever had has always worked out to the better. I work really hard to find that, but sometimes bad things just have to be bad things, but you can't get stuck there. So sometimes those things just land in your lap, like Kelly asking me to go to Southeast Asia. Sometimes you just decide you want it and you go make it happen. Put a date on the calendar and see what happens.
Now, one of my stories around that is that when I was creating Scaling Up, the vision was I wanted to alleviate human suffering through mainly the group EMDR protocol and kind of scaling up EMDR that way. And I figured out how to build a very basic, not pretty website on Wix. This was like 5 years ago or something. And I just put my vision out there, like, mission statement. I didn't even have services to provide. It was just like, kind of like putting it out there. And as I got connected with Dr. Herrero, I had shared that website with him, like, let me know your thoughts and feedback. And that was the moment that we actually started to work together because he realized that our missions were aligned. And so that's when he invited me to Mexico to do research with him and the team. And we were kind of like getting to know each other, feeling each other out, seeing if we wanted to work together. But that was, exactly what I did was just kind of put it out there. And then networking, reaching out to people. I don't think those opportunities usually just fall in your lap. It's usually you send an email, you have a Zoom call, you have a coffee, you're talking to people. And then oftentimes those people will say, you need to talk to this person. You need to get connected. It reminds me of this person. And then I always follow up with those people, whether they respond or not. And that has really served me well. And I know, Sadie, you're very vigilant about that as well.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more? I know that you're talking about, how things don't always go well. That has happened to me as well. And sometimes the way that I see that is like a pivot. You were saying you don't see it as a failure. I kind of see it as like, okay, I'm pursuing what I want to happen or do in this direction over here. And then it feels like it kind of gets cut off. And I think sometimes people feel like it's not meant to be. They feel really discouraged or deflated and they just don't keep going. And I've kind of learned to see it as like, oh, we're pivoting over here and now we're going this way and now we're going this way. And it kind of starts to create like a zigzag over time. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of what that's looked like for you with pivoting directions over the years?
And I think pivot is a great word for it because it's not like you got thrown off track or, sometimes I'll say it all fell apart, but it's that pivot of it going one direction and then you're doing something else. And that usually tends to get you somewhere interesting, or at least it does me. So the first pivot was back in, 2012, 2013, when I was working in Africa. I was in Zimbabwe. And I was supposed to be there for roughly 3 months doing some EMDR with a clinician there in a school. And long story short, I won't go into too many details there. I ended up only being there for about 2 months. I was supposed to be there for 6 months and I was there for 3 months because things fell apart and I needed to leave. So sometimes my pivot often looks like jump on a plane and get out. And so things fell apart there. Working with some Americans that I wasn't comfortable continuing to work with in that setting. I'll say it that way. And so I jumped on a plane and came back to the US. And again, it had fallen apart. And so at that point, I didn't know what my next steps were. And that was when I decided to go to Montana and open my practice there. And I picked Montana because I had a colleague, a good friend of mine, who was a therapist, but she did a lot of equine therapy. And I was considering bringing that into my practice, but I didn't have the money for the overhead. Horses are expensive. So I thought I can go work with her. So I opened my practice in Montana to do this equine work with her, and her life fell apart. She went through a divorce, and so that just never happened. And so then that kind of fell apart. And then I stayed in Montana for a while longer, and I kind of told you that story. But then when Kelly and I put things together, the first time we went Southeast Asia, a lot of stuff worked out really well. Not everything, but a lot of stuff did. And then when I went back, she and I devised this plan it's like, great, we're going to go back and do this work in the camps. We want to go work with the host community. We want to work in Dhaka. How are we going to fund this? And so we had this great plan. I'm pretty sure the idea was Kelly's, to have other clinicians that wanted to come do this work. And so they would pay a fee to come work with me to learn how to do humanitarian work and to learn how to do IGTP in a humanitarian context. And so we were funding it this way. Sounds good on paper. And there were some ups and downs with that for sure. And so working with that initially, having different clinicians come, and there were some really wonderful people that I met. One of them is here today, Tim, and he's a good colleague of mine. And we met in an Indian restaurant in Dhaka and just connected. And again, my people. And he and I did some great work there. I can tell you some stories about watching Tim do group work with a bunch of women. And my job that day was to chase the goat out of the room. Every time it would come in, I could not keep the goat out of the room. But Tim was doing the hard work. And so I got to do that. And we were working on getting into the camps to do some more work there. And it all fell apart for a handful of reasons. Getting into the camps had become a lot harder. So getting camp passes was difficult. And we were having a hard time getting clinicians into the country because of the shooting that had happened in New Zealand, which was, not even on the same continent, but world events happened. And so then the whole thing started falling apart the way Kelly and I had originally envisioned it and had started doing it. We were in the middle of doing it. And some things that we probably could have planned differently didn't work out. Some of that was not our fault. Some of that we could have done differently. We learned from, but in the end, then there were some security issues in the camp for some complicated reasons. So then it wasn't safe for me to go back into the camps. And so then the whole project fell apart, and the safety piece was nobody's fault. That was just an issue that had happened within the camps. And so then it was no longer safe. And we had these clinicians coming over. So we ended up pulling the plug on the whole project. And Kelly had to cancel things for people. And we had some research that we were doing. It was a big project that we had both poured a ton of time and effort into really getting going. And we had it going, and we had it going right to the point where it was about to really take off. And then this security issue happened, and we had to pull the plug on the whole thing. And I had to jump on a plane and go to Thailand and get out of there. And that makes it sound a lot scarier than it really was. I jumped on a plane and went to Thailand because they have a great onsen there. But but we lost the whole project, and it was just crushing because we had put so much effort and time into it, and a lot of planning and a lot of fly by the seat of our pants planning and figure, like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out hopefully soon. And there was so much of that went into that. And so then we pulled the plug on the project about a month early. And so, and that was good. We kept everybody safe. So there was no disaster. It was just the emotional piece of that. And so then I left Thailand and went back to Argentina, because that's what you do when life falls apart. You go to Argentina. And so I went and spent the last month there, just kind of dancing and decompressing. And my therapist is down there. So I went and saw her to kind of deal with some of that. And, and then I came back in June of that year and was working with clients here in my practice in Denver, and started picking up some more intensives and making some money. And then we had an opportunity to do a project in Rwanda in that following fall. And I was very, very excited about doing that after we had lost this other project. And before we got that one off the ground very far, we ran into a problem with an IRB, with an internal review board for the research project that we wanted to do. And the funding fell apart. And so that one fell apart before we got very far. And so the lesson here, when life falls apart, go to Argentina and then keep going. And so, it fell apart. And every time it's fallen apart, whether it was what happened in Zimbabwe or it was what happened in the camps in Bangladesh, that, we learned some valuable things from all of those lessons. And so then picking up those pieces and moving forward and pivoting to what's next and going from there. So, and then I had some plans to do a project in Kuala Lumpur with one of the organizations that I had worked with there. I was just starting to talk to them about that in 2020, and we all know what happened there. So pivot again, and here we are. So I know I'm not the only one. We all made a big pivot in 2020. So we all know we're capable of pivoting. That's kind of where that goes.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm definitely hearing that, this work, branching out, doing community work, doing humanitarian work is naturally going to have many pivot points. And so when that happens, you might need to take a break, right? You need to go get some R&R in Argentina or somewhere else, your backyard, wherever, take a break and then start again. See what the next best step is for you and your path. So thank you so much for sharing. We are at time, so I want to give folks one more minute to type a question in the chat if there's something you want to know. While you're doing that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some other opportunities that you all have to connect with Sadie and others. So we have our second annual Be Bold Summit taking place June 10th and 11th in Denver, Colorado, and we're going to be live streaming it as well if you are unable or uncomfortable with traveling. And this summit is designed for the audacious and authentic therapist. That's all of you right here on Zoom right now. That's you that wants to learn innovative and creative ways to scale up your impact in your community, in the world. Take your big ideas and do that next step. Say yes to them. Tell folks about it. Say yes. So you will be in really good community space with other people that want to say yes and maybe have been feeling afraid, they need extra connections, or they need some more information. Be a great place for you to speak into existence the thing that you want to begin. We'll have 12 incredible speakers, and you'll receive 18 continuing education credits for the cost of admission for the summit. And today, just for being here on the webinar, you're going to get a link in your email that is going to give you a 20% off discount when you register for the summit. That coupon code is good for 3 days. So if you're curious, if you're interested at all in what would it be like to be in a space with other clinicians that are on the verge of saying yes, right? Like, can you say yes to coming to the summit? Maybe that is your first step, right? Come to the summit. Maybe you can't travel. That's okay. Join us online. You'll get to meet everybody online. You get to have time with the speakers, everything. We'll get to see everything online, just as though you're in person. So say yes to the summit if it feels right for you. If you're feeling that little twinge of excitement or like, should I go? Yes, it's going to be fun. I would love to see you there. I know Sadie would too, and Kelly as well. So thank you so much for your time. I am going to check the chat real quick. I don't see any specific questions in the chat.
Also, real quick, Robyn, since you and Sadie are speakers, for those of you that want to stay a few more minutes, can you both just share what you're going to be talking about at the summit?
Oh, Sadie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's this the name of my presentation is Just Say Yes, and developing your alternative EMDR practice. So one, we're going to look at barriers and do some actual therapy. We're going to do IGTP and assist on what is that barrier for me to just saying yes. So we're going to talk about just saying yes, but then actually explore what's that barrier you're experiencing right now from that thing you want to do. And so some of it's my story and some of what you got here today, but then it's taking that and applying it to your specific situation. Because you can listen to mine all night and day, and if it's inspirational, that's great. But how do we make this actually actionable for you? And that's the goal.
Awesome. Yep. So basically, more in depth on what you were talking about today to really help folks move forward, take those next steps. I'm excited. I will be talking about, I'm only going to share a snippet because, but I will be talking about survivor-centered and justice-oriented care for survivors of sexual violence. So it'll be very specific. It'll be a talk that will help clinicians figure out alternative ways to helping their clients move forward in their healing journey that don't involve the carceral system and other systems of oppression that tend to traumatize even further folks who experience that kind of trauma. So it's something that's really relevant for a lot of clinicians that I talk with and in relationship with, who want to center anti-oppressive way of doing psychotherapy. But what does that look like in a situation and in a scenario where really there's only one option, and that is to involve the carceral system in one way or another. So it'll be a really curious exploration and community, conversation with everyone that shows up in this space. So I'm excited to talk with you all about that.
Yeah, we have some amazing speakers, and part of the reason we're doing the summit is because in the scaling up community, the people that are part of this community tend to be people like you who want to scale up what they're doing, who have big and bold ideas that want to help more people, whether that's in your own backyard, whether that's online, whether that's internationally. We all have our gifts and our visions. And that's part of what draws people into scaling up is that type of person. And that's the type of people that are going to be speaking at the event. So we're hoping to kind of bring all of those people together, either in person or online, so we can feed off of each other's energy, we can network, we can feel inspired by speakers that are doing these things, ask questions. And then my presentation is going to be at the very end of the summit to kind of help wrap everything up. So the goal is going to be to help people actually leave the summit with some sort of kind of not action plan, that sounds kind of sterile, but kind of not get too overwhelmed by all the information that they're receiving and actually take a moment to percolate the information, to digest it, and to figure out, what are the key takeaways that I'm going to, take from this experience and move forward so that I can put this into action in a way that feels right for me. And what kind of people am I going to follow up with? What are the next steps so that it actually, results in something at the end. So for those of you that are interested, we hope that, you join us. Definitely look out in your email, check your spam if you don't see it. Sometimes it goes to the spam folder. And let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to see you there or at any of our other events, trainings, webinars. We want to know you. Please don't be a stranger. And thanks for coming today. Thank you, Sadie and Robyn, for this experience.
Thanks for joining us and giving us some of your time. Hope to see you in June.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.